When President Barack Obama was in office, he received a letter from a young boy from New York named Alex. And in his letter, 6-year-old Alex said, "Remember the boy who was picked up by the ambulance in Syria? Can you please go get him and bring him to our home?" Alex was referring to 5-year-old Omran of Syria, who was shown on the news in the back of an ambulance, bloodied and stunned, after an airstrike in Aleppo. And President Obama was so moved by Alex's letter that he read it aloud at the United Nations Summit on Refugees. At this summit, President Obama urged nations to welcome the stranger in our midst, as the refugee crisis continued and still today continues to grow. In his urging, President Obama allowed his moral center and his Christian belief to guide his words and his actions in seeking to aid refugees in need. In asking President Obama to bring young Omran from Syria so that he could adopt him, Alex illustrates what it means to truly love one's neighbor. Loving my neighbor is what my own Christian faith commands. And there are no qualifiers for which neighbor I'm supposed to love, which stranger I must welcome. So I can only assume that this means that I am to love all neighbors, those most in need. My Christian faith asks a lot of me, and at times I'm going to fall short. If I in turn look to what is asked of me, then I can continue working in the right direction at least. When first reading tonight's scripture from the lectionary, I smiled and shook my head a little bit. Nancy and I were talking just before service about how I really don't need to preach tonight because the scripture kind of speaks for itself. There's not really much else to say here. But the first reading from tonight comes from the book of Leviticus. And in it, God speaks to Moses, sharing a message with Moses that Moses is then to pass on to others. And to me, this is one of the Bible's many "don't be a jerk" passages. And in it, God says that when you harvest your land, you should leave some for the poor and the foreigner. Don't steal or lie. Don't keep wages from someone. Don't show favoritism. Don't gossip. Don't stand by when your neighbor's life is in danger. Don't let things fester or carry a grudge. And of course, love your neighbor. If I truly am loving my neighbor, then I'm probably not doing all of those other things that I'm asked not to. Loving my neighbor means not lying or stealing or holding a grudge. It definitely means not standing by when someone's life is in danger. In this passage, God commands that I love my neighbor and doesn't specify which neighbor I am to love. So I can assume, again, that I am to love all neighbors. Not just my Christian neighbors, and not just my neighbors born in the United States. In fact, in the beginning of the passage, I'm asked to leave some of my crops for the poor or the foreigner. So leaving some of the crops in my field is maybe a little bit difficult for some of us to relate to, those of us living in urban centers. Many of us don't have any land at all, let alone land that could be harvested. We likely don't have any crops that we can share with the poor or with the foreigner, but at the root, or I guess not the root because we don't have crops, but at the core of this message is an urging that we are to share what we can with those in need. That we give any amount of surplus to those who might benefit. So perhaps it means that when I clean out my car, maybe I save the change that I find for someone who's asking at a busy intersection, someone desperate enough to risk injury for spare change. Sharing with the foreigner is something that 6-year-old Alex from New York seems to understand better than many adults, probably better than myself. When Alex saw someone in need, he did not stop to ask what religion Omran was, why Omran couldn't get help somewhere else, why Omran couldn't stay in his own country, or if Omran's father was a terrorist. What Alex saw was a person in need, a neighbor who needed love. It is not likely that everyone has space in their homes or the financial resources available to bring refugee families into their homes as Alex offered. But what God asks of us is to consider what we may have left on the vine, what crops may have fallen to the earth, what amount we can give to those in need. So for some, this may mean opening our homes. For others, it may simply mean sharing a meal. For others, it may mean finding ways to help shape legislation. None of us can do everything that is needed to help, but it's important that we each do what little that we can. While in office, President Obama saw that the United States could not help every single refugee in need, and so he encouraged the leaders of other countries to welcome strangers into their land as well, so that we all, collectively, may care for those in need. We are asked not to just stand by when our neighbor's life is in danger. This command from God is particularly important as it is often easier to not act. It's easy to become a bystander during particularly difficult and harmful or dangerous situations. February is Black History Month, a month during which we celebrate Black history because in the United States, when we learn what we simply call history, is history that has been from the viewpoint of mostly white, mostly cisgender, mostly heterosexual men. And so the white men who have written the history books have largely influenced the history that we learn, both inside and outside the classroom. So unfortunately, this means we miss much of what has happened throughout history. So in theaters right now, there is a movie that well illustrates this. It's called Hidden Figures, and it's about the lives of 3 Black women who worked for NASA during the International Space Race. In the United States, we frequently hear of the first U.S. citizen in space, and we hear about the first man to walk on the moon. What we don't hear about as often is the people who made that happen. Especially not the Black women who worked on the mathematics and the engineering who made all of this possible. So this movie follows the lives and the struggles and the contributions of Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, and Mary Jackson. And at the time, despite their genius and their skills, they had to fight extraordinarily hard to succeed in the face of the racism and the sexism that they encountered. And today, their story is finally being told. Black History Month exists so that people can begin to share these stories and stories like them, stories that should be part of our common narrative were it not so skewed. During Black History Month, it's common to hear people make comments about how if they were alive when such and such happened and what they might have done. If I was alive during slavery, I would have helped slaves escape. I would have helped to abolish slavery. If I was alive during the Civil Rights Movement, I would have walked over the bridge in Selma. I would have fought to get Black people to vote if I was alive then. Well, I'm alive now, and there is fighting to be done now. Violence, discrimination, racism, and white supremacy are not dead. They did not die with the abolition of slavery. They did not die with the right to vote. Racism and white supremacy are alive and well in this country, and from our highest office to our city streets. It is costing people their lives. In our reading from Leviticus, God says, don't just stand by when your neighbor's life is in danger. Lives are in danger every day in this country simply for the color of people's skin. I need to think seriously about what it is that God is asking of me when God asks that I not stand by. When it comes to questions of racism and white supremacy in this country, I have the privilege of being white, and I have the power and the responsibility to work for change. But I'm not always going to get it right. Sometimes I'm going to say the wrong thing. Sometimes I'm going to miss opportunities to act. Last month, when driving to Philadelphia for the Creating Change conference, my friend and I were driving through a suburb of Springfield. And on the side of the road, we saw multiple police cruisers pulled over. And as we passed, we counted 4 white male police officers and 1 Black teenager. And I slowed down the car a little bit, and we debated about whether or not we should stop. And I'm sorry to say that we did not stop our car. that we let our own fear of law enforcement guide us, and I kept my foot on the gas pedal. It was only a few miles later that we admitted that we had made a mistake, that we should have stopped the car. We should have made our presence known. We should have questioned why so many grown men were needed to deal with one unarmed teenager. We should have videotaped what we saw. We should have done something, but we didn't. We made a mistake. I made a mistake. I'm going to make mistakes sometimes. But I can't let that stop me from working for what I know is right. And I can't let that stop me from loving my neighbor, because I'm still learning how to love. I'm learning how to love during this most difficult time. This most difficult time when I often feel myself full of rage, full of righteous and holy anger about all that is happening around me. During this most difficult time when Jesus calls on me to love my enemy. To love my enemy. In Leviticus, in this "don't be a jerk" passage, there are many ways that I'm called on to love my neighbor. And in our second reading from tonight from the book of Matthew, Jesus takes it a step further and asks that not only do I love my neighbor, but I also love my enemy. So I know I'm going to mess up when I try to love my enemy. This is hard work. And it's hard enough to love my friends and my neighbors sometimes, so it's certainly hard to love my enemies. Like the passage from Leviticus, this is another "don't be a jerk" passage, but this goes further and asks not only do you not be a jerk, but that you kill them with kindness. Well, probably don't kill them, but overwhelm them with kindness. In the passage, Jesus says, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. But if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn also the other. And if anyone wants to sue you to take your coat, give your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go also the 2nd mile. Give to everyone who begs of you, and do not refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you." This is perhaps one of the most well-known pieces of scripture from the Second Testament, and a reminder not to return hatred in kind. Rereading this passage this weekend, I felt a bit at a loss, and I got a little bit hung up on one word: resist. Do not resist an evildoer. But resist is the word of the movement that I have joined. People across the nation have banded together in the resistance. I've been going to actions, I've been writing letters, I've been preaching, I've been having conversations with people all about the resistance. When I'm walking around the city and I see signs that welcome refugees and posters that promote love, I take pictures with my phone and I put it in an album labeled "The Resistance." The exact thing that Jesus is asking me not to do. Do not resist the evildoer. So I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm going to get caught up, even in seeking love. What Jesus is asking here in the book of Matthew is that I not seek personal vengeance, that I not be driven by a desire to seek revenge and make personal my actions, and that instead I be willing to go to the opposite extreme, which is hard. And Jesus notes that God makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. And as God loves both the good and the evil, so should I. So perhaps instead of focusing on resistance, I should focus more on persistence, following the lead of my wise senator who seeks love on the Senate floor. This is how we love our enemies, by helping them to see the way of love, by encouraging and growing together in care for one another. So together, with those who have banded together in persistence, I must seek new ways of loving my enemy. even though I know I will make mistakes. Even though I know I won't always get it right, I can look at what is being asked of me and move in the direction of love. Jesus asks me to be perfect like God is perfect, but the truth is I am not. I am not perfect. I am human and I am flawed. I make mistakes even when I'm trying my best. But what I can do is try, and I can persist. And together we can all turn in the direction of love and know that despite our shortcomings and our setbacks, that nevertheless, for love, we persisted.